It's got the center line, which is really important when you're drawing your technical drawings in order to rotate your shape. This particular drawing, what I've done actually is created as a symbol, so that if I make any changes elsewhere on this document to this figure, it will do so throughout the whole document. What I've done here is, I thought what was quite interesting is sometimes when you see these actual templates, they're very static. You can't do much with them. I've seen some where you've got arms going at different angles. So on this actual template, what I've done is I've done the sleeves as a separate object, and so if I want to change the angle of this arm now, I can do so. And the red marker that you see at the top is just to remind me as a mark where the top of the actual arm is. So as long as I know that that marker's touching the shoulder, I know that I've kept that arm in proportion. So you can see I can keep on changing the angle as much as I'd like. And then once I'm happy with it, I can actually reflect it on the other side, so the other side is the same. So it's just a tip here. I am going to make this available to my students. You know who you are. You should be able to get that within the week. But again, if you're not one of my students, it's quite easy to create one of these, and also just to draw the sleeve separately and send it to behind. So I'm just going to go back to where we were before, and I'm going to come out of isolation mode. Now what you'll find is you've got two different types of figures that people tend to use for illustrations. With illustrations, you've got a fashion figure that's used for editorial, and you'll find that the body actually is a lot longer. This figure that we use for technical drawing is a body that's an average person's body, so you won't find that the legs are much longer than the body with these, and it's not a good idea to use that for technical drawings. You want the body, the template that you use, to have a body that's really realistic. So in this term, we actually know that the body here is actually divided up into 8 heads. And by 8 heads, what that means is if I take this head shape here and I move it throughout the body, it goes, if it's divided within the body, it goes through 8 times. And these are called head widths. Okay, so what we'll find here is we've got 2 head widths for the chest area up until the waist. You've got 2 head widths that go between the upper legs, and 2 that go through to the lower part of the legs. You'll always find as well, these are really good tips to remember, that the waist must be aligned with the elbow. So if you're doing a jacket, for instance, is a good guide. If you can see where the elbow is on your jacket, you know that your waistline is about the same location. And then you've got the wrist. If you have the wrist, if you see here, it's aligned with the crotch area. And then you've got the knees and the ankles. So we've dealt with the length of the body. Let's have a look at the width and how that works out. Okay, so if you look here, you can see that the shoulders are just under 2 head widths, and they are narrower. The waist is narrower than the shoulders, as I said to you before. You see these vertical lines going down, you can see how much of a distance there is between the shoulders and the waistline. And then if you come down to the hips now, you can see that the hip area is 1.5 wider, 1.5 head width, should I say. So you can see it kind of goes out at the shoulders, comes in, and then out at the hips. So that's what I said. If your hips are broader than your shoulder, you're actually going to end up with a very sort of body that's not in proportion. Okay, so we've got that up. Now I can show you a couple of sketches to see where common mistakes are made. Let me just move this along. So if I bring up, for instance, let's have a look at the skirt. We've got this knee-length skirt here, and they both look, I mean, you know, some of them, it's quite obvious which one isn't in proportion, but just for the argument's sake, you don't know which one is. You can actually tell by looking, take that off actually, that this is the correct proportion. So we're looking at a knee-length skirt. We're not talking for all skirts. we're just talking if it was a knee length skirt that you wanted to draw. It's basic, no design details on it, just for the proportion purposes. You can see that this one is the correct one. When you look here, you can see that the waist, if I go actually closer, let me go closer so you can see. The waist on this one is much smaller and the hips are very broad. And if we go down further, we can see when we look at where our knee positioning is, if we look at our knee here and we go across, you can see that this is not actually knee length. So that just goes to show you how sometimes if you have one area or a couple of areas that are not in proportion, how it can throw the whole thing out. Let's have a look at the one that's in proportion. Obviously you can see it fits nicely around the waist. The hips, it glides over, goes straight down, and it ends at the right position at the knee. Okay? So let's have a look at something else actually. Let's go along here. Let's go a bit closer for you to have a look. So let's look at these trousers. They're just a slimline chino. Again, these might be quite obvious to some people, but I'm just going to pull them up so you can have a look. So we've got to have a look at the trousers here. We can see that one obviously has got a shorter rise and a longer rise, and one is longer. And we can kind of see our template here anyway to give us a bit of the guide. But if we go to find out which one is actually the correct one, we can see this is the correct one. And let's have a look at it on the body. So as you can see, let's go to the one that's incorrect. As you can see here, it's quite subtle, but the rise, the front rise, this is what the front rise, this is the front rise. If we go really closely, we can see it's actually further than the lady's crotch area. So you can see it's actually shorter. That would cut right through somebody. It's not, they wouldn't actually be able to get it on if the rise was that short, if it was shorter than their actual body measurements. So you can see that's incorrect. Also, if we look down here, not only is the trouser too long, the legs are really narrow. I don't even think the lady would be able to get her feet through it. So that's one thing to consider as well. Construction, is it possible to actually put those on? And then the one that's probably quite most apparent here is the hip area is in the wrong place. So the hip kind of, if I actually show you here, if I was to show you, this is your hip, the hip line that's on this sketch. But if we look at our hip actually starts from here. Remember, the hip and the wrist are in line. So it's actually just been really distorted. The hips are in the wrong position as well. Okay. On our correct side, you can see it's in the right position. The right front rise is in the right position. It glides over the hips where it's supposed to be, and it finishes at the right length as well. Now, as I said to you before, this is just proportions for a slimline chino. You will have to look at your own design and make sure that it relates to your own illustration or your own concept. And let's just look at one last one actually, just to get a bit more from this. So let's have a look at this shirt, for instance. So we've got a slim-waisted shirt. So we're expecting, if we're saying it's slim-waisted, we're expecting obviously it's going to have darts because it needs that if it's a woven fabric, to have darts in order for it to be quite fitted. So we've got one on this side and one on the other side. Let me just move this to the other way. Okay, just slightly. Can you see it? Slightly. So if we look at which one is actually correct, we can see that actually the one that's correct is actually, let me turn this round. That's technology for you. If we go here, we can see that this one is actually incorrect and that one is correct. Let's have a look at it on the body to give us a bit more of a guide. So the reason why this one is incorrect, and I could spot it straight away, is number one, if we're using this template as a guide, we can see that our shoulders are not even in the right place. So let's have a look. you can see the shoulders are not in the right position. We can also see that the shoulders, even though the shoulder seam is not in the right position, the shoulder slope is not correct. You can see it needs to be more angled. You can see that the shoulders are too broad. They're very wide, they're very broad from the actual template underneath. Thirdly, we can see from the collar, as I was speaking to you before about where your collar, your neckline is in comparison to your neck, you can see that this collar is very far down. It actually needs to be up and it needs to be closer to the neck. You can see it's very broad. Let's have a look further down. Again, I did say in the beginning that this was a slim fitted shirt. Our waist is here. We've got fit lines at the waist, but we can see that our waist part, that where we've drawn it, the way we've drawn that curve, isn't really showing that it is in the hip, in the waist area that the shaping is. So you can see it's kind of further lower down, which it needs to be around this waistline. Let me show you the one next to it. So you can see how it goes in at the waist, then it comes back out. Whereas this one, it goes further down, then it goes in, then it comes back out. It's not correct. Last but not least, we can see that our sleeves are far too long. And so this is the incorrect sketch to use. If we look at the correct one now, we can see at the collar, it's a really nice shape around the neck, really lovely nice shape around the waist, and comes out with the hips, because obviously the hips are wider than the waist, so it needs to go out. And that again is because it is a slim fit shirt. If it wasn't fitted at all, it would just be straight, obviously. And then if we look at our sleeves, they're in the right position, they end at the wrist. One thing to remember is when we make clothes, we don't do the sleeve length to the exact wrist. Sometimes we have it a little bit longer, because if you can imagine, when you lift up your arms, the sleeve will get shorter, so we need a little bit of an allowance there. So on this sketch, I've gone a little bit further past the actual wrist. And that's that. So as you can see, common errors. Best thing to do really is just to really get your head round the alignment of body parts. So again, elbow and your wrist. And then always remember that your shoulders are always going to be broader than your waist and your hip. So that's the end of the session. I hope you found it useful. I hope you can go away and make your sketches more realistic. And I'll be back to show you the male figure and how that kind of relates. Very similar, there's not much in it. Obviously when you get to the waist area it is a little bit different, but hopefully I'll be able to come back and give you a bit more info on that. So until then, happy technical drawing.